What's up everybody, Commander Sanctum here, and today we have a brand new deck tech using Kuja Genome Sorcerer. Kuja is a 3/4 human mutant wizard for 2 black-red that says, at the beginning of your end step, create a tapped 0/1 black wizard creature token with, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this token deals 1 damage to each opponent. Then, if you control 4 or more wizards, transform Kuja. Kuja transforms into Trans-Kuja, Fate-Defied, a 4/6 avatar wizard with, if a wizard you control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals double that damage instead. True to the game, Kuja is all about wizards, and what do wizards do best? Sling spells, of course. For this deck tech, we'll be focusing on 2 things, wizards and spells. We'll include black mages to remain flavorful, and include some other wizards in Magic that are great at dealing damage. Combining this with spells to trigger said wizards, and we'll have a force to be reckoned with. With that, let's get into the card highlights. Black mages, which Kuja just so happens to create, work very well with our overall theme. In fact, they're some of the best types of creatures we have access to, since they deal good damage to opponents whenever we cast a non-creature spell. Queen Brawn is a good source of repeatable black mage generation, simply needing to attack to create one. While she has a base power and toughness of 2/1, the fact that she has prowess, and therefore will be able to get much bigger before combat, means that she'll more likely survive to be able to attack again on the next turn. Mysidian Elder creates a black mage when it enters, making it a good flicker or recursion target if possible. Black Mage's Rod can turn any creature into a black mage, and even creates one itself when it enters, making for a very good source of damage. Heck, you can even equip the rod to an already existing black mage, giving it another damage trigger on top of its normal one. Circle of Power and Transpose are 2 spells that both draw cards and make black mages, making for excellent includes in the deck. They're also both non-creature spells, meaning they'll trigger already existing black mages when cast. Circle of Power even gives wizards +1/+0 and lifelink until end of turn. The lifelink is especially of note, since any future black mage triggers will gain you life, since they deal damage to your opponents. If Kuja is flipped, each non-creature spell will gain you 6 life for each black mage you control, making for an excellent way to recoup some life. Cornered by Black Mages is a rather mediocre removal spell, but it does net you a black mage, which makes its cost of 3 worth it. Lindblum Industrial Regency is part of Final Fantasy's Town Adventure cycle, where the adventure side can give you a black mage for 3 mana, and the normal side turns into a tap land, making it an easy include in a land slot. Outside of black mage token generators, we also have some normal wizards that work well with Kuja's transformed side. Black Waltz number 3 is, much like in the game, a more powerful black mage, dealing 2 damage to each opponent on non-creature cast instead of just 1. A flying Death Toucher is not too bad either. Coruscation Mage has the same ability as a black mage, but also has Offspring, letting you get a token copy of it for an extra 2 mana. This is effectively the same mana and damage rate as the Black Waltz, just spread over 2 bodies, making for a more resilient damage dealer. Gitu Journey Mage also does 2 damage to each opponent, but on entering the battlefield instead of any sort of spell cast. While this isn't as great as the previous options, it does leave behind a 3/2 body, making for an excellent attacker or blocker, especially when its damage is doubled thanks to Kuja's transformed side. Gleeful Arsonist is like a reverse black mage, dealing damage whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell. This can actually be, in a lot of cases, better, since you don't even have to do anything to get some damage on your opponents. At the very least, it may prevent your opponents from casting a non-creature that they want to, which is still an advantage for us. Anathemancer is a great game ender, at least for a single opponent, since a lot of decks nowadays use a ton of non-basic lands. Combine that with Kuja's double effect, and you'll be able to one-shot an opponent pretty much out of nowhere if it's late enough in the game. Storm Splitter is a great way to attack an opponent for a ton of damage. While each token of it will only have 1 power, Kuja's doubling effect can make this 2 per, and since we're a Spellslinging deck, we'll have the capability to make a ton of tokens all in one go. Speaking of Spellslinging, we also have a few non-wizard cards that give us value for casting cheap non-creature spells. Professor Onyx and Fiery Inscription are 2 such cards that will deal 2 to each opponent whenever an instant or sorcery specifically is cast. Professor Onyx even gains you 2 life whenever this happens, making it a great card to recoup some lost life. Stormkiln Artist gives us a treasure token whenever an instant or sorcery is cast, making it much easier to continue to cast spells on a turn, or let you stockpile some mana for an explosive turn later on. When it comes to spell slinging, why limit ourselves to only our spells when we can cast our opponents as well? For this, we have Stolen Strategy, which will give us our choice of spells from among the top of our opponent's libraries. You might get lucky and get a removal or ramp spell, which will not only impact the board in your favor, but also trigger all of our spellcast abilities to boot. Wand of Wonder takes this a step further, letting us always get an instant or sorcery and cast them for free. It does cost 4 mana to do, but if we get lucky with the roll, may let us cast all 3 of them, making for a very effective and efficient spell-slinging source. To maximize the damage we can deal with each spell cast, we can include some additional damage amplifier sources alongside Kuja. Since most of our damage stems from creatures, Gratuitous Violence is a great way to double up the damage being done, and even helps in combat from any non-wizard sources we may have. City on Fire triples damage from any source we control, increasing the damage done exponentially. While it does cost 8 mana, the Convoke is actually a boon for us, since we'll likely have at least a few 0/1 black mages that we can tap to make it cheaper. Artist Talents level 3 increases damage by 2 rather than doubling it, but includes other useful functions like reducing the cost of non-creature spells and letting us rummage whenever we cast one. One of the best types of spells to cast for our spell-slinging strategy will be card draw. Not only will this get us to more of our payoff cards, it'll also just make sure we can continue to cast spell after spell. Typical card draw spells include ones like Faithless Looting and Night's Whisper, alongside Deadly Dispute, which works well with our overall theme since we'll have sacrificable creatures if we need them. There's also my personal favorite cycle of red card draw spells in Big Score, Unexpected Windfall, and Pirate's Pillage, all of which draws 2 cards and makes us 2 treasure tokens. This effectively makes the net cost of these draw spells 2 mana, making for a very effective rate. Likewise, the fact that Big Score and Unexpected Windfall are instants are a boon, since it'll let us cast them on our opponent's turns, perfect responses to things like board wipes to eke out a bit more damage from our black mages before they die. Alongside normal card draw effects, we also have impulse draw effects, which can be great ways to get some extra, albeit temporary, card advantage. Ren's Resolve and Reckless Impulse are 2 cards that do the exact same thing, letting us get an additional 2 cards to cast until our next turn. They're also nice in the fact that they're play abilities, meaning you can use lands that are exiled from them. Ramp is another important aspect of any deck, and while we don't have access to green, we have a few options that can work with our non-creature theme. Mana Geyser is the quintessential mana generator in red, netting you a ton of mana later on in the game to let you cast pretty much your entire hand in most cases. Wayfarer's Bauble is another great way to ramp out a land, and can even act as mana fixing in cases where you're missing a color. Being able to cast spells twice, or even get creatures back after they've been removed, can be a very powerful way to make sure that our strategy goes according to plan. Mizzix's Mastery is probably the best way to do this, since overloading it will let you automatically cast all instants and sorceries in your graveyard for free. Past in Flames requires you to cast them for their casting cost, but is still a great way to get a second shot at casting your best or cheapest spells. Bloodline Necromancer works perfectly in this deck, since we're so highly focused on wizards. If one of your best wizards gets removed, simply reanimate it with the Necromancer to continue dishing out the damage with it. Finally, there are a number of good utility cards that work well with our overall theme. As far as instant and sorcery utility goes, we have Fandaniel Telephory Ascian, which can act as either creature removal or a source of extreme life loss, either of which are advantageous for us. There's also Rionia Fire Dancer, which can be a great way to get additional copies of our best non-legendary creatures, whether that's a black mage token or something like an Anathemancer, which would be especially devastating to opponents. Arcane Bombardment is a great way to make sure we can cast a ton of spells in a single turn, since the longer it stays out, the better it'll be. It is a bit of non-bow with Fandaniel, but is ultimately too good to pass up. Reign of Gore is a great way to prevent our opponents from gaining life. Since a deck focused on life gain is going to be the antithesis of our deck, turning that life gain into life loss is a great way to mitigate our most unfavorable matchup. Strionic Resonator is a great way to either make sure we could flip Kuja sooner than usual, or simply double up on the non-creature spell trigger of a creature we have out. Here's an example deck list utilizing all the previously mentioned cards. Additional cards include more effective card draw in Seize the Spoils and Blood for the Blood God, cheap removal spells in Infernal Grasp and Untimely Malfunction, and useful artifact-based ramp in Cursed Mirror and Patchwork Banner. Kuja is a pretty great Spellslinger commander, especially for one in Rakdos colors. Izzet is usually the Spellslinger color combination, so seeing it viable in another 2-color combination is always a cool thing to see. Admittedly, Grixis is one of the 3 color combinations most commonly associated with Spellslinger, so the black was always there, but dropping blue and still being a good strategy isn't something seen very often. I do also love the flavor of Kuja. In the game, he's one of the creators of the black mages, which is exactly what he does on his front side. His flip side is also pretty nice, but to be honest, there aren't many wizards that actually have the direct damage effect like the black mage tokens do. Most cards that do something of the sort, like Gutter Snipe or Kessig Flamebreather, are actually shamans, not wizards. This makes it more difficult to stick with the theme of non-creature spell cast damage, since our pool of wizards is smaller. This is compounded by the fact that there aren't actually too many cards that create these black mage tokens. This is a new thing with the Final Fantasy set, so they only show up here so far. The fact that they're generic black wizard tokens gives me hope that more cards in the future will make them, but only time will tell on that one. Still, there's enough payoff cards to make a Kuja wizard-based Spellslinger deck work right now, which is all that really matters in the end. If you're a fan of off-color spellslinging or wizards, give Kuja a try. I think you'll find that he can work well while being fun and unique at the same time. I hope you enjoyed watching this deck tech on Kuja Genome Sorcerer. The full deck list outlined in this video can be found at the Architect link at the top of the description. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to drop a like and comment, as well as subscribe to the channel for more Magic content. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.